right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about Warfare. This is going to be a heavy one, but we got some great stuff to get into with it. This is the new film from Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza. Alex Garland, director of Annihilation, our first ever episode of Piecing It Together. So it's always a fun thing when we get back to a new Alex Garland film, even if it's a heavy one like this. But yeah, we got a great conversation coming up. Joining me to talk about Warfare is documentarian Davey Schaupp, and we'll also be talking about his new film, No Place to Grow Old. And we get into a lot of great puzzle pieces, have a great conversation about No Place to Grow Old. And yeah, that's all coming up here in a second. Before we get to it, though, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. So let's talk about Warfare. All right, it's time to get into Warfare, and we've got Davey Schaupp joining us. How's it going, Davey?
It's going great. Happy to be here.
Yeah. This is obviously going to be a bit of a heavy one, but I think we'll get into some interesting stuff here, and we'll also talk about your film, some No Place to Grow Old. But before we do start diving deep into Warfare, tell us a little about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I am a documentary filmmaker. I am self-taught. I kind of started in the commercial short documentary world, and over the last few years have made the transition to longer form documentaries. And usually they're in conjunction with some level of a social initiative. So this is
Hmm,
what you call like an impact documentary, where
sure.
they're made in partnership with an organization or some level of social outcome.
That's great. And I mean, obviously that's kind of I feel like, over the years we get documentaries on so many different kinds of things, but right now, I mean, what is more important for that particular format than something that has impact in the world that we're living in, especially with all of the various multiple issues going on right now. So it's definitely a good place to approach the genre from for sure.
Right. No, I totally agree. And I think so many times people, documentaries say something that is true, and then people are emotionally activated and want to get involved in some way. So it usually feels like even if it's not a serious, heartbreaking issue, there needs to be some kind of next step where people can like implement what they've learned about reality into their lives.
Sure. No, absolutely. Well, I mean, getting into Warfare, it's an interesting movie for us to talk about having a documentary filmmaker like yourself on the episode because this film, while it is narrative and it is, a regular film, it does feel very documentary like. It feels almost like a recreation of a very specific thing, which is exactly what
Right.
it is. And that's why they went with that approach. Alex Garland, though, are you a fan of Alex Garland's other work?
I've seen Civil War, and I really love Civil War when it came out.
Mm.
But I haven't seen any of his previous films.
Okay, all right. Because yeah, I was a huge fan of a lot of his stuff, and this is definitely very different for him. It does feel in a lot of ways like a almost like a companion piece to Civil War, which I mean, I know when that movie came out, he paid a lot of lip service to. Oh, I think I'm retiring from movies, and then like a month later, it's like, oh, by the way, I do have this other movie coming out in like 6 months or something, Warfare. But so I guess he's not completely retired, but yeah, it does feel like he was still in a certain mindset and wanted to explore like kind of a different area of war and of just the ongoing, never stopping conflict that everything is always in. So yeah, I mean, he certainly is in a certain headspace right now, and then kind of helping to get into that is this actual soldier who is telling a real story that happened to him and co-writing and directing this movie with him. But yeah, it's an interesting project for sure, and a little different from anything that he's done before. But I think it'll be a cool one to get into here with some puzzle pieces. But with
Right.
that said, let's get into it. What do you have for your first puzzle piece here for Warfare?
Yeah, so the first puzzle piece that I actually picked was a film that just got released a few months ago, Sing with directed by
Okay.
Greg Quaidar. It's a movie about men who are in the penitentiary system, Sing. I think it's in New York, but essentially these are men who are incarcerated for their life, and they're like join a drama program. And so
Hmm.
this drama program is like really challenging to them, and in the core pieces are very different, right? You've got men who are in Iraq and you've got men who are in a prison in New York. But what's similar is actually it was co-written by someone who came out of the prison system,
Sure. Yeah.
and actually about half the cast are graduates from that drama program. And so there's that level of almost, you said earlier, like that documentary feeling aspect where you're like, this is actually isn't just trying to recreate a new world or a new characters, but it's actually trying to recreate reality that has already happened. And
Yeah.
so I wasn't sure if you'd seen that film yet, but that was the first puzzle piece I thought because it connected immediately to me of like they're both trying to recreate something that's happened fairly recently and like tell the truth about that.
Absolutely, yeah. Trying to instead of create a new experience, just recreate an
Right.
experience that has happened to these people. And yeah, Sing Sing is a great movie, and that had not occurred to me. But now that you're bringing it up, it like really, really fits really well here. And the way that this person is kind of sharing their experience and sharing it by using such reality within the storytelling. Obviously two very different kind of situations, but in a way, both situations where the people are kind of stuck, and this is their life, and they're kind of trying to get through it basically
Right.
in whatever way they can. So, I mean, there are definitely similarities there between the experiences, even though they are different setups to begin with. But yeah, no, it's a really interesting one to kick it off with, and I like that a lot. I'll stay in that same kind of vein here for my first one. I was thinking of the Clint Eastwood film, The 1517 to Paris,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
that was also a movie where it was involving actual military. Two of the people were soldiers. The other person, I think, was just a part of this experience where three people they thwarted a terrorist attack on a train, and that isn't the that was I believe written by Clint Eastwood, but also directed by Clint Eastwood. So it wasn't actually written by the soldiers themselves, but he actually cast the people who were part of the experience in the movie to kind of give it that realism, to give it that grittiness, to kind of bring the experience in a very real way. And it's a pretty solid film. It's not Clint Eastwood's best, but it is an interesting experiment though. And I think Warfare, I really enjoyed the movie Warfare, and I think it can be chalked up as a kind of a experimental film in a way because it
Right.
is doing a very specific thing. It's not a traditional narrative in a way. And I think 15 to 17 to Paris was definitely another movie that, it doesn't necessarily everything work as like a general normal cinematic experience, but as something that's just trying something different, it was a really interesting experiment.
Right. No, that's a great call out. And I think what I remember about that film too is I don't think it does it quite as well as Warfare did, but it really tries to build tension by like
Hmm.
letting scenes roll out in kind of real time, and you can't
Yeah.
quite escape them. You're almost like stuck in that moment, and it's not cutting away too early. You're almost stuck in it. Um,
Yeah.
and I think Warfare did that, and I would say it even did it a little better, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
I think so too. I think so too. And also another thing about, I mean, this is kind of a tangent, but Warfare. I'm a composer. That's like where I come
Okay,
from into movies, and Warfare has no score whatsoever, and
right.
it's
That's
like
such an
the
interesting thing.
it's the best choice because if you're going to tell a story in real time essentially and really put you in the shoes of these people, I mean there's no music. So
Right.
yeah, so it's definitely a smart choice on the filmmakers and everybody involved to do that. So but yeah, let's go to another piece. What do you got next?
So the next piece I had was Alfonso Cuarón's Children of Men or Children of Men.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
what kind of brought me to that piece was the sweeping camera work. The camera
Mm.
work actually really intrigued me on Warfare because it kind of like oscillated between two aspects. One would be these like very journalistic feeling tripod pieces that would be like the camera was on sticks. It was just like looking at things that were framed usually very symmetrically. And it
Hmm.
almost made me feel like some of Civil War because they had that journalistic feeling of Civil War a little bit. But then
Sure.
they would have these big sweeping camera motions when the men were breaking out, when they were loading out. Um, and it really kind of pulled back some of this tension, or at least for me, pulled back Alfonso Cuarón's Civil War, um, which I think was shot by Emmanuel Lubezki, who's
I believe you're
known
right.
and known for those like very like dreamy movie camera pieces. So yeah, I think that immersive filmmaking and that immersive filmmaking paired with like just like long takes that really feel high intention kind of
Sure.
pulled me back to that film.
No, absolutely. That's a great one. And yeah, the intensity of Children of Men is
Right.
something that's really hard to match, And I think Warfare certainly tries to get there. And yeah, I believe, if I'm not mistaken here, I believe the cinematographer David J. Thompson, it's his first film as a cinematographer.
No
I
way.
mean, yeah, I mean he's been a camera op on a lot of stuff, but like first time like straight up listed as cinematographer, which is kind of crazy. I mean, obviously he's worked on plenty of other stuff, but and you have somebody like Alex Garland, directing, so you've got like a clear vision here. But yeah, there were some really striking shots in this movie, and
Right.
I think they really, really, help to get you into the experience, like you're saying there. But from kind of the same era, I'm gonna go to the movie that I think. If you're trying to sell Warfare to somebody who hasn't seen it yet,
Right.
while it is, experimental in nature, I think the movie you could kind of easiest compare it to would be Black Hawk Down,
Mm,
Ridley Scott's war movie. A mission gone wrong, basically. The escape vehicles keep getting hit. Everybody is stuck. Nothing is going right. Just
right.
stuck right there in the middle of this war zone. This is obviously a much starker, just tense kind of a story here, what we're doing with Warfare, and injecting it with so much realism and all that. But essentially the setup very similar to Black Hawk Down, and so I wanted to include it here. And I mean, really, Ridley Scott is another filmmaker who knows how to make a movie. Alex Garland knows how to make a movie, and I mean, these are people who, if they want you to feel something, they're going to make you feel it. And I think that's kind of what they're setting out for here with Warfare, and really going for it and really succeeding.
Right. Can I mention specific moments in the film, or is
Yeah,
this
yeah.
no spoiler?
Spoil away. We're spoiling
The
here.
moment, I think it's probably about 30% through the film where the IED goes off the first time is
Hmm.
just like, it's to me, I feel like that's such a core piece, of course, in the plot, but you also realize that like things are just not going to go to plan. Like up to
Yeah,
that point, you feel like they're responding well, everything's going well, they're kind of like rolling with the punches. You feel like, oh, these are a really capable group of men that are going to get themselves out of here. And then there's just that like shattering moment where that IED goes off, and you realize like this is just like we're up against things that they can't control.
yeah, yeah. The sound design in that moment too is just it shook the entire theater, Um,
Yeah,
but it's funny too with that moment because like from the get go, I mean, just going into this movie, that things are going to go bad. That there's going to be some
right,
horrific violence.
right.
Just war just being a terrible, terrible thing. But you kind of don't know at all when that's going to happen. And we're already talking about how there's no score, so there's really nothing like cluing you in when it might finally kick off, and then just boom, there it is. And yeah, it's a very effective moment there for
Mhm.
sure. So let's go to another piece. What do you got next?
Yeah, the next piece is kind of just touching on what you just mentioned. I tried to pull away, all of these films aren't necessarily war films because I was trying to be curious on how I could pull in other films, but I chose Whiplash um,
Okay.
because of how that film drives intensity with sound design.
Hmm.
I don't, there's a, it's about a jazz drummer, and so there's like a lot of rhythm, but there's a very heightened level of sound design. And I was thinking about it when I was watching the film. There'd be these moments where someone's like drinking water or unscrewing a bottle cap or moving around. And I felt like the sound design was turned up loud enough where it actually became almost like a main character. Like it was
Yeah.
so obvious that you were cued in, like, oh, he's drinking water. Oh, he's scraping this thing across the desk. And so then later in the film, when they're in combat and you've got all this like comms chatter coming on, and it's just this building tension of people speaking over the radio, you've got someone yelling, you've got like gunfire happening. It just gives this like, you're already cued in so highly to the sound of the reality that when it's building,
Yeah.
it just feels like overwhelming. Um, and yeah, when I was thinking of other films that really do sound design well, or that I remember that do sound design really well, um, that was one of the first films that came to mind.
Yeah, Whiplash is just so good, and yeah, talking about sound design, I mean, it's all there, and it all is just so musical in the way that it's built up and everything like that. And yeah, that's a great one. I'm gonna, it is another war movie, but I'm gonna kind of jump right on top of that and talk
Right.
about some more sound design here that goes really well with Whiplash. It's a movie I'm not a fan of. I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I know everybody else loves it. It's Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk,
Okay.
which I mean, I appreciate what he was going for with that movie. I just don't think it necessarily works, but certainly though the sound design is fantastic, and
Right.
certainly it looks amazing, and Hans Zimmer's score is fantastic. All the filmmaking elements of it are great. What I didn't like about it is I didn't give a shit about any of the characters in
Mm,
Dunkirk, and I think that's by design. I think it's certainly by design, but it didn't make for an enjoyable movie. I kind of was expecting that to be the direction that Alex Garland was going for, and it said it was going to be more about kind of the macro versus the micro, not really like
right.
focusing in on the characters. But I ended up really connecting with the characters here, which made it a much more interesting experience. I really thought Joseph Quinn was fantastic,
Mm,
and like I wanted to see them get out of this, even though we knew that not all of them were going to. It's a really different kind of experience in that way. But I do think that the setup of trying to take what's essentially a war movie and do something different with it. It's not just like rah rah hooray. Here's the good guys. Here's the bad guys. We want to see them win. Like it's doing something different with it. And I do think that Christopher Nolan was doing something interesting with trying to do a different thing with war movies, which is a genre we've seen a million times before. I think Warfare is a lot more successful, though, in doing something different with war movies and making it worthwhile. But yeah, I think Dunkirk is something that I think, as much as everybody else loves it, I think they should watch Warfare because I think they'll really get a lot out of it too.
right. I'm curious, well, two things on that. I think in Dunkirk, there was that ticking sound that was so
Uh
evident
huh.
that felt like it raised tension. And then they also were using that effect of a shepherd tone, which is like an
Mm,
incessantly rising tone that just
yeah.
builds on itself to just like, oh, I mean, just such a terrible feeling of suspense throughout that film. But did you feel like there was a protagonist in Warfare, or do you feel like it was kind of all of them?
It was just all of them. That's how I looked at it. I saw
Right.
it as a group of people who, for better or worse, have they're in the war, and like there's we could talk about the validity of a reason to be in that war, or any reason that they're actually signed up and got themselves stuck in the trenches like this. But for whatever reason, they're there now, and
Mm,
hopefully they can get out because it's looking awful.
right.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely not a lead character though in any way. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree. I wonder how, with such simplicity, they were able to build that emotional connection because they did that really well.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, let's go to one more from you. What do you got?
So the last one is kind of an obvious one, but I chose Civil War because it feels like to understand warfare, you like Civil War just to me was a huge precursor.
Hmm.
And both in the film style, where you had these like beautiful symmetrical shots. I thought that Civil War, focusing on a war journalist and a war photographer, felt like a lot of the frames mimicked what you would see coming out of a conflict zone, or they felt like they could have been filmed kind of through the lens of a war photographer. Um,
Sure.
and then also, it kind of avoided melodrama. Like, I think one thing I
Hmm.
really appreciated about Warfare was even though it was talking about an incredibly tense, like horrific moment, it never felt like it like pulled in the violin, or pulled in these moments, or there's no soliloquies by men. It felt like it kind of avoided this like over dramatized version of reality. And I thought that Civil War did that also at a brutal level, where it kind of almost pulled the punches repeatedly where they could have really gone in. But because of that, you leave with this just like deep gut, like wrenching feeling of like, oh, this really is reality.
Yeah, I think that is definitely a big aim with why Alex Garland has taken this sharp left turn into these two back to back war films. Is like his movies have always had a kind of a gut punch kind of
Right.
reaction to them, and I think it's kind of like just turning the camera on what's been going on for decades and decades, really forever basically, but and certainly still going on now, and so showing that and just being like, we could do it with sci-fi, but this is what's really
Right.
happening for a lot of people. So, yeah, heavy stuff from these two movies together, absolutely. I've got two more I actually want to bring
Yeah.
up. The first one, this kind of goes along to the sound design conversation we were just having. I kept thinking of A Quiet Place.
Okay. Yeah.
As far as that just pin drop intensity of like everyone in the theater, it like stops chewing their popcorn because they know
Right.
something bad is about to happen. I think that movie, I'm not super hot on the sequels, but that first movie really did a magic trick of
Right.
filmmaking and sound design of like really getting us to all just lock in to what the characters are going through. And yeah, it's a really strong performance of sound design, basically. The other thing I wanted to bring up on my other movie podcast, Awesome Movie Year, we're currently doing 1941, which happens to
Okay.
be right at World War II,
Right.
and there happens to be a bunch of movies that are either propaganda films or propaganda-ish, let's say. And I'm not saying Warfare is a propaganda film. If anything, it's almost like an anti-propaganda film, because why
Right.
would you sign up after watching this? But there's a movie called Target for Tonight from 1941 that we covered, and it's a documentary. It's essentially just a uh, a straight up recreation of this one individual war effort,
Mm,
and it's all told in real time. Now, this is 1941. It's much older. There's not huge explosions and all the sound design we're talking about and big movie stars in it. It's basically people in a room talking about the mission and actually carrying it out from phone calls and putting through their little orders and stuff like that. And it's kind of boring. It's not great, but the idea though of recreating this mission in real time and showing the intricacies of what the people that are doing it are going through in trying to carry it out. It definitely made me think of this movie that I had just watched like a few weeks
mm,
ago, and it's certainly an interesting experiment. We're talking, we started this conversation talking about the experimental nature of all this, and
right.
it's certainly an interesting experiment to try to really show you the ins and outs of exactly what goes into pulling off a mission like this. And
Mm.
where Warfare, as bleak and dark as it is a lot more exciting to watch. Target for Night, not as much, but again, it's still an interesting experiment.
Yeah, that's a great call out.
Right on. Well, yeah, I think we got into a lot of great puzzle pieces here. Any closing thoughts on Warfare? Anything we didn't quite bring up that you wanted to mention?
I think one thing that I thought maybe we could finish on was and you kind of just touched on it, but the moral ambiguity the film ends with. I think one of the
Hmm.
most powerful scenes of the film is probably right 80% of the way through, maybe even 90% of the way through. They're loading out for the final time, and one of the families that they've kind of, kept watch over is the woman is screaming, why,
Hmm.
in English. And I almost wonder if Alex Gardner is like asking the same question with the film. Like
Yeah.
there's this level of just like bewilderment of like, why? And even after the film is over and you're left to kind of just like settle into the destruction left behind, both in the Iraqi community and then also with these soldiers, it's just, it's not picking sides, which I really respect. But
Yeah.
I struggled to find a film that honestly held that level of integrity, or at least that approach in the same way. So I wanted to bring that up and see if anything came to mind for you.
That's a really great point. And I was actually thinking about that myself, and I couldn't think of one.
Mm,
And I think that that's a really interesting sign. And there probably is something out there. Maybe somebody could write in with that. But it really shows just right now how just I, flustered. That's not even a strong enough word that we all
mm,
are with the world and just how just awful it feels. A lot of this stuff going on, and I think Alex Garland is picking up on that and showing like, yeah, this is just terrible. Basically, it's
mm,
terrible for everybody. There's no winners here.
right.
Some people survived, but I'm sure things didn't work out all perfectly for everybody once they got home. I mean, and it certainly didn't for the Iraqis, whose houses they destroyed, whose homes they just demolished. Like,
Right.
yeah, it's bad all around, and I think that we're all kind of just pondering on that right now, and just yet it keeps happening, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, like I said when we started, a lot of heavy stuff to get into here, but yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap up Warfare. Let's talk about your film, No Place to Grow Old, a little bit. I mean, first of all, tell us a little bit about what the film is.
Yeah, I wish we were leaving heavier waters for lighter waters, but
Sure.
the film, my film is actually about a pretty heavy subject as well. So it's about older adults who are kind of either on the precipice or like aging into homelessness.
Hmm.
Homelessness is rising across the US, and actually, adults over 55 are the fastest growing demographic entering it. And most of them are entering it for the first time in their lives, which is a pretty, um, yeah, a pretty cold and jarring statistic. So the film is a documentary and it follows three older adults in the Portland area who are essentially like navigating life either right on the edge of homelessness or who are sleeping on the streets. And I hope that it does some of what Garland and Mendoza were able to accomplish, where it doesn't necessarily pick a side too much. It doesn't really either condemn these people and say like, "Oh man, they have made all these wrong decisions," or paint them as innocent, but hopefully just build a window into the reality of who these people are and um, what life looks like. And it does kind of talk. We interview a couple experts who are both local. So we interview an economist, a professor here who leads the homeless initiatives throughout Portland, and then also a national expert based out of Harvard. And we kind of hear a lot about what the systemic solutions to homelessness, especially older adult homelessness, are. But mainly, I think the film asks that question, a similar question of like, are we okay with letting this happen as a nation? Um,
Right.
and one of the experts says near the end that as a nation, we should be judged by how we treat the most vulnerable in our society. And it's kind of leaving that question of if we're being judged by how we're treating our older adults and the situations that they're aging into, are we comfortable with that as a country?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting too, like, just coming off this conversation on warfare. I mean, this is a major assumption on my part, but I have to assume that a lot of people who are soldiers probably are in positions where they aren't
Right.
able to transition their lives afterwards and end up in
Absolutely.
situations like this. Yeah. So I mean, it's just it's awful. But you am I right? You founded Humans for Housing? Is that right?
I co-founded it, or I was a founding board member, and
Okay.
I help lead their like storytelling and social impact side. But
Okay.
Michael Larson, who was the executive producer of the film, was kind of like the initial founder.
Okay. So obviously this is an issue that, it's a major issue for you. Is this a project that you spearheaded yourself, or was it something that kind of came to you through the organization?
So Michael is a close friend, and he actually was a documentary filmmaker for a while before moving into more of like a nonprofit leadership world. And he kind of brought it up to me and said, like, Davey, this is a crazy idea. I don't know if this will work, but I want to like launch my nonprofit on the back of a film. I feel
Mm.
like so many films that nonprofits make are just like terrible and they
Hmm.
feel like a bad commercial. And I really want to do the storytelling around this in a way that feels deeply human and also cinematic. And like
Yeah.
if I could find, a little funding, would you be down to spearhead this project? So that started about maybe 15 months ago, 16 months ago, and then we like slowly moved into pre-production. And then we had a really small budget and time window. So we filmed over 20 days with these three subjects and a couple of the experts. And really just like it was very organic. There was a three-person team. We were using natural light a lot. And we were kind of like leaning into a bit of that more Emmanuel Lubezki, like voyeuristic, just doc
Mm.
feeling and following people kind of through their lives. And we were lucky enough to meet these three subjects who were trusting and warm, and they let us into their lives. And the response has been really amazing. I mean, we released it in September, and now we've been just doing these screenings throughout communities because we really want the film to live in rooms that people watch it together and that people can respond to, you know, any emotional activation they have. And I think we've done close to 65 screenings across Portland so far. And
Wow.
we're hopefully going to do a screening for Congress this summer and keep building momentum for it.
Yeah, you just did one for Senate, right? Oregon State
Yeah, we
Senate.
just did one for the Oregon Senate. Yeah. It was the first time they've ever screened a documentary, which was pretty amazing. And
How did that
um,
come about? Yeah.
they reached out to us. They actually just felt like older adult homelessness is honestly just getting to a pretty detrimental crisis level in our country, and yet no one
Yeah.
has like told this story through film. And so they reached out to us and they asked if they could screen it, which was really special.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Are there other things happening right now? I mean, I know it's such a divisive time right now in our country, but are there other things that are happening that are kind of giving you hope for any kind of leadership towards any kind of solutions?
Mm.
It's a tough one
I
for
think,
sure.
yeah, I think at a regional level, there may be a few things that are happening in Oregon that are giving me hope with like some of the ways that nonprofits are collaborating and just like working and building more housing. Um,
Hmm.
but at a national level, I would say absolutely not. Sadly, I
Yeah.
think we're on track. We were on track within the last few years for this population to triple by 2030.
Hmm.
And just the way that we are defunding organizations that a lot of times are what keep people housed,
Yeah.
taking
Yeah.
someone's rent down $300 a month is a huge thing, and helping people out with food is a huge thing. That as the boomer population continues to age, because it's kind of two terrible things happening at once. It's like the largest cohort in American history is getting older and putting a strain on everything. And with that, there's kind of this bottom percentage of it that don't have a safety net, and that
Right.
we're just shrinking the safety net right now in the current administration, is shrinking that safety net. And so I'm afraid we're going to see only an increase, but who knows? I mean, that I don't say that to sound hopeless, but um, I don't see any specific policies or action steps that are moving towards change at this moment.
Yeah, all we could do is shine a light on it and hope
Right,
that there are people that are going to continue to take that ball and run with it and
right.
do something, but certainly not from the top. We know that. So obviously, documentaries are a kind of a different animal from narrative films. But with that said, I mean, we are doing the puzzle pieces on the show. Were there any documentaries or documentarians who were kind of an inspiration with this film for you?
Mm, yeah, that's a great call. Um, well, we used the Interatron for this film, which is a system where you pretty much put a teleprompter in front of the camera and my face is on the teleprompter. So it almost would feel like a Zoom call, like right now you're talking to someone on a Zoom call. And Earl
Okay,
Morris, who's a very famous documentarian, he was
sure.
the one who kind of invented that whole system. And so just this idea of having the audience make eye contact the with the subjects felt really powerful, especially about a topic where people kind of avoid eye contact with people who are
Right.
homeless.
Yeah.
And so that was an inspiration, just his whole camera system and how he does interviews. And then two short doc directors who are way less known, but Rika Zeptachi, she's an Israeli director, and she's done some really meaningful impact documentaries. Did one about India called Period End of Sentence that won Best Short Doc at the Oscars, I think 2020. And then another short doc Oscar winner, Ben Proudfoot, who won 2 years ago. And then I also think in 2022, he also uses the Intertron a lot and just does these like they both make films that just feel very human. And I knew that more than anything, like we have enough facts in our life when it comes to homelessness. What we don't have is this feeling of humanity. And so I
Right.
look to their work often on how they do scores, on how they build these scenes. And I actually had a long call with Ben Proudfoot kind of early on to the project just to run it by him and um, hear his thoughts. And so, yeah, they both were kind of like North Stars when I was building the film.
That's cool. That's really cool. Is there anything that you're going to be working on next that you'd like to share?
Yeah, right now we're working on really releasing the film because that takes a lot of work and time. I didn't realize that getting into it. And we're building together right now a museum that will be located in Portland of like a collection of the stories. And so that's kind of the
Oh,
first. thing we're doing as an organization, and I'm working to like produce all the storytelling for that. So it's not a full documentary. And we're going ahead and starting to like move slowly into pre-production funding for the next documentary that will kind of be focused on family homelessness. Um,
Hmm.
and and then I've got just a few personal projects that I'm working on. Hopefully, we'll be working on a short doc this summer about South Carolina's poet laureate Glennis Redmond. South Carolina is where I grew up, and there's this amazing woman who's the poet laureate there. And I'm
Hmm.
hoping to make a short documentary kind of telling her story.
Very cool. Right on. Well, this has been a great conversation. Tell people where they could find you and all your work.
Yeah, and so you can find more about the film just at noplacetogrowold.com. And that's where you can watch the trailer. And if you'd want to host a screening in your community, you can do that. And then my work is on just my name, daveyschaupp.com. And my email's on there. I don't have any form of social media at the moment. I've kind of stepped back from that world. Uh,
Smart.
but yeah, I'm definitely easy to get a hold of through email.
Right on. Well, Davey, thank you so much for doing the show. Good luck with the doc as it keeps getting out there, and hopefully we'll get you back again sometime.
Yeah, thank you, David. This has been great.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about warfare. Thanks so much to Davey Schaupp for joining me on that one, and thank you to all of you for listening. If you're enjoying Piecing It Together, of course, make sure you are subscribed. You can also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. I've also been really building up my Substack. You can sign up over there. It is just a totally free Substack. It's replacing my old version of my mailing list, and it's a good way for me to stay in touch with you whenever I've got live shows coming up or any other kind of interesting things that I've got going on. And social media kind of sucks for that. It's fun for certain things, but for the most part, it's terrible. So join the Substack. That way, I could actually reach out to you and let you know when I got some cool stuff happening. But yeah, that does it for today. Let's close this out with a piece of music like I always do. And of course, even though this film had no score, I got to go with a very, I don't know, war-like track to go with this film. What should I play today? I'm going to go from my Missing Pieces album, a track called At the Gates. This would fit quite well. So this is At the Gates. It was on my album that just came out earlier this year called Missing Pieces. It's a 40-song instrumental compilation album. All of this music I've made over the last 6 years. It is the lead up to the final album I'll be putting out from this era of my music, which will be out at the end of this year. It's kind of getting all the bonus tracks out ahead of time, kind of, but some incredible music on this album that I'm really, really proud of, and this is one of those tracks. So hope you enjoy it, and we'll be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.